Minister, I am happy to speak here today on this important piece of legislation. I recognise at the outset that, regardless of our political or personal thoughts on this sensitive subject matter, we all have a legislative imperative to scrutinise the bill and to ensure that it reflects best practice. In particular, I was struck by comments made last night by my colleague in the other House, Deputy John Lahart, that this legislation will outlive us all in terms of political endurance. For good or for ill, how we stand on this may go down as a defining element of our political and legislative legacy. This once again speaks to the need to carefully weigh the issues at stake and to give honest, if uncomfortable, appraisal of each of its sections. In light of this, I will say to the Minister that I was very disappointed to hear some weeks ago that he had sought a waiver from the Business Committee of the other House to forego pre-legislative scrutiny. It is my sense now that if that careful and exacting process had been engaged in, we might have avoided some of the more inflamed interactions that took place in both the Select Committee stage and indeed at report stage in the other House. Let us not then repeat that mistake and seek to rush through legislation for the sake of adhering to some arbitrarily defined and ultimately self-imposed political deadline. This House and its members, the members in it, must be accorded the space and the respect necessary for sufficient analysis. The pace at which this process is moving in terms of actual parliamentary analysis is quite striking, and I think no one can reasonably deny that. For instance, amendments to the committee stage of this bill, which is due to be heard now on Monday, have to be submitted within 1 hour of second stage concluding. That is unacceptable, Minister. It's also bringing into reality what the doctors outside of these houses are saying. This week, in fact, the very renowned and respected Dr. Austin O'Kennedy in Donegal said that the government are trying to push through a GP-led abortion service without providing any training whatsoever, resources or equipment to the GPs. That's a GP from County Donegal. He called the process an outrageous farce, and you're expecting the GPs to implement it. Therefore, the referendum result did not somehow magically confer a blank cheque to the government in terms of simply being able to present a bill while at the same time decrying any attempt to amend it. We have a noble and honourable parliamentary process in this Oireachtas. It cannot be hurried along like an unwelcome guest whenever the desire to do so suits our agenda. I will now deal with the substantive issues. It is clear that the most striking line in the entire bill we have before us is to be found in the definitions section. There it notes that, and I quote, "Termination of pregnancy in relation to a pregnant woman means a medical procedure which is intended to end the life of a fetus." This is an absolutely stark and unequivocal statement, and one which we must not shy away from during the course of this debate. I am aware that some of those who supported repeal of the 8th Amendment expressed significant reservations about the use of this definition in the mistaken belief that it somehow imported the ethical vision of the 8th Amendment back into primary legislation. This, I believe, does not bear any kind of reasonable scrutiny. We must call things by their proper name. We must not engage in euphemism or indirect language that evades the true grave nature of this bill and, more importantly, what it seeks to make permissible or lawful. We are dealing here with the circumstances in which the life of a human child can be ended. We need to face that squarely. If we cannot defend that rationale, or if we seek to minimise what it is we are really about here today, then I think deep denial continues to exist around the issue. There is much more that could be said. There are many questions which I would like to put, and no doubt we will have an opportunity to do so. There are many people outside of these houses with reservations, including those which the Department, the Minister and the Government seek to implement this legislation from the new year. There are issues, as Senator Norris rightly outlined, and I agree with him, around conscientious objection. We have learned nothing from what is happening up the channel in Norway, for instance, on the 11th of October, where a doctor who was terminated from his employment took a case to the Supreme Court and won it on the grounds of conscientious objection. But yet we are denying those rights to our doctors, midwives, nurses and pharmacists. There is much yet to be debated in relation and teased out in relation to this bill. To rush it through is doing a disservice to the Irish people. And I would appeal to the Leader of this House and to the Minister — Minister Harris is not here — to allow us the space necessary to tease out some of these issues on behalf of people outside these houses who are raising these issues with us. It is our obligation to raise and highlight these concerns, particularly in light of the facts, as outlined by Senator Mullen, that over 1 million people, when the O'Mara research analysis is taken into consideration, including the people who voted no, are not in favour of this particular piece of legislation as proposed by the current government. I think we have an obligation, and if it's only a few of us standing up to represent those people, then so be it. But I will not be left wanting in that regard over the coming weeks.